proposed a $50 million bail package, offering his Miami home and his mother's home as collateral. He committed to staying in close contact with authorities, only communicating with certain people, and even suggested hiring a third-party security team to monitor his home if he were placed under house arrest. However, 2 judges denied his bail request, so Combs has been...
Over check, 1, 2, 3, over. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings. I hope you all are doing good. Hope you all are doing great. So your boy here come across this one, which is circulating. P. Diddy fainted, as in collapsed, in a court after hearing this shocking from the judge. Plus, guys, you will be also hearing from MUTABARUKA attacking a lot in this poetry, this poem, Fully Active, out. So guys, this one is gonna be really a warm one. So you wanna stay tuned, and don't forget, I'm here on the Black Unity program. So feel free to leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you're new. With that being said, let's go ahead and hear what's going on in this one. So my people, let's walk.
As Sean Diddy Combs awaits the decision on his 3rd bail request in appeals court, he was back in court last Thursday to get the latest updates on his criminal case. As the trial for his sex trafficking case approaches, we might hear less from his attorneys. During the court session, we learned about their efforts to exclude a key piece of evidence against him, as well as the trial date and the evidence found in the hip-hop mogul's mansions. Additionally, there was a discussion about the support he's receiving from his family. Here's a recap of the court proceedings and much more. First, let's talk about Sean Combs and his large defense team, who were back in court on Thursday in front of yet another new judge, Arun Subramanian. He will be overseeing Combs' trial, which is currently set for May 2025. Another point of interest is why the issue of bail wasn't discussed this week. Although a petition was filed for a 3rd attempt at bail, it's being handled by a different court, the Court of Appeals. Specifically, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals will decide if Combs should be granted bail. Earlier this week, Combs' attorney, Alexandra Shapiro, filed a motion for pre-trial release with the Second Circuit. She emphasized that this case does involve extreme and unusual circumstances, but argued that these circumstances shouldn't prevent bail or force Sean Combs to defend himself from jail. She pointed out that Combs was detained right after he was charged, despite having lived in the public eye for his entire life, with his actions widely reported and known to law enforcement. There's really no risk of him fleeing. He's a 54-year-old father of 7, a U.S. citizen, and one of the most recognizable and successful figures in the world. The hype surrounding Sean Combs' arrest has skewed the way his bail situation is being viewed. Despite his willingness to agree to strict conditions that would eliminate any risk of flight or danger, he was not released pending trial. In fact, Combs proposed a $50 million bail package, offering his Miami home and his mother's home as collateral. He committed to staying in close contact with authorities, only communicating with certain people, and even suggested hiring a third-party security team to monitor his home if he were placed under house arrest. However, 2 judges denied his bail request, so Combs has been behind bars at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn since September 16th. One of the reasons cited for keeping him locked up is his alleged influence and reach. Prosecutors have claimed that Combs engaged in witness tampering and intimidation. However, his legal team disputes this, acknowledging that he had discussions about the civil lawsuits he was facing, but insisting that he was unaware of any investigation by the Southern District of New York. Once he learned about the investigation, his appeal motion states that he made sure to cut off contact with those individuals. The motion notes, while the government vaguely described contacts with 2 grand jury witnesses, it provided no evidence of threats or intimidation. They only mentioned there were 14 contacts between Mr. Combs and one witness, as well as another witness who was contacted multiple times. Defense counsel clarified that these contacts did not involve any obstruction or witness tampering. For example, one of the witnesses reached out to Combs, not the other way around. She informed him, "I'm a grand jury witness." After Combs told his defense team about this contact, he was instructed not to communicate with her again, and he complied. Shapiro argued that the prosecution has not met its burden to keep Combs detained until trial. Days later, an update was filed with the court stating that the bail motion has been referred to a 3-judge panel. However, their request for immediate release while awaiting a decision on the bail motion was denied, though the motion to seal was granted. In summary, Combs won't be released immediately. He has to wait for the judges to review the arguments before making a decision. Diddy broke down in front of the entire courtroom upon hearing that his $50 million bail package had been denied. The music mogul, who is used to the comforts of mansions and private jets, now faces the grim reality of life in a cramped jail cell, and the news hit him hard. His bail package was a last-ditch effort to avoid staying behind bars after his arrest. Diddy, yes, the Diddy we all know, was willing to go to great lengths to secure his release. He proposed a staggering $50 million bail, an eye-popping amount that left everyone in disbelief. His legal team crafted this massive offer, essentially throwing every valuable asset Diddy had into the mix to try and get him out, even if just temporarily. To start, he offered a jaw-dropping $50 million in bail. But that was just the beginning. Diddy went all out, putting up his $48 million Miami mansion, complete with all its lavish amenities, and even offering his private jet, the same one he likely uses for spontaneous globe-trotting adventures. As if that wasn't enough, Diddy brought his family into the mix. His mom and other relatives co-signed the bail package, showing just how committed they were to getting him out of this situation. On top of that, Diddy promised to surrender his passport, so no jetting off to some tropical paradise, and even agreed to home detention. He was practically saying, "Look, I'll stay home, just don't make me stay in jail." But there's more. His lawyer sweetened the offer even further by proposing weekly drug tests to prove he was clean, a nightly visitor log to keep track of who was coming and going, and even restrictions on female visitors. Aside from his mom, daughters, and their mothers, no other women would be allowed to visit him. Diddy was ready to follow every rule thrown his way if it meant avoiding that jail cell. He was pulling out all the stops to stay free. Despite all this, the judge took one look at the impressive bail package and said, "Nope." Why? This is where things got tricky. The prosecution presented a strong case that Diddy wasn't exactly someone you could trust to stay out of trouble. They brought up some troubling details from his past that painted a pretty unflattering picture. One major point of concern was a series of old text messages from Diddy that, let's just say, weren't the kind of messages you'd want anyone to see in a courtroom. One text from 2016 stood out, and it was pretty alarming. It came right after Diddy was caught on camera with his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, at a hotel. In the message, he was in full panic mode, practically begging for help. "Call me! The cops are here! I've got 6 kids! Please call! I'm surrounded! You're going to abandon me all alone!" It really showed how desperate and manipulative he could become when things were spiraling out of control. But that wasn't even the worst part. Allegedly, he paid the hotel $50,000 to erase the security footage of him throwing glass vases at Cassie during that incident. That kind of power move doesn't look good when you're trying to convince a judge that you won't tamper with evidence or witnesses. The judge also had to take into account Diddy's immense wealth and influence, which gave him plenty of opportunities to make things disappear, whether it was evidence, witnesses, or anything else that could jeopardize his trial. Let's be honest, someone with his kind of money can do a lot behind the scenes. The court was concerned that he might use his resources to obstruct justice or even intimidate those involved in the case. And let's not forget that Diddy has a history of controversies. He's faced accusations ranging from bribery to obstruction of justice in the past, so the concern about him potentially tampering with witnesses this time isn't just unfounded paranoia. In fact, when you look at other high-profile cases, Diddy's situation starts to make a lot more sense. Take Harvey Weinstein, for instance. Back in 2017, he was denied bail despite being willing to put up millions. Why? The court was worried about the same issue, obstruction of justice. And then there's Jeffrey Epstein, who also proposed a hefty bail package, but the judge shot it down out of fear that he'd use his wealth to either flee or tamper with witnesses. The courts have dealt with these scenarios before, and they weren't about to take any risks with Diddy. Why the music mogul couldn't handle the news. When Diddy heard in the courtroom that his $50 million bail offer was rejected and realized he wouldn't be going home, it felt like watching someone crash into a wall at full speed. Witnesses reported that he looked utterly shaken, as if all the pressure he had been under for weeks had suddenly come crashing down. Picture this: a man who has spent decades living in luxury and always being in control is now reduced to someone barely holding it together. He wasn't just upset. He was crushed. Eyewitnesses described the look on his face as the judge delivered the verdict. His usual composure vanished, replaced by disbelief. Some claimed they could see him trembling, and it seemed like he was on the verge of fainting as the judge's words registered. Did he actually collapse? Whether it was from shock, stress, or sheer emotional exhaustion, he clearly couldn't handle it. Paramedics were called in, and it quickly became evident that the reality of his situation was hitting him harder than he might have anticipated. This wasn't just a physical reaction, it represented something deeper. Diddy, who had lived a life surrounded by fame, fortune, and luxury, now had to confront the harsh reality that his days of private jets and red carpets were over, at least for now. He was facing the reality of a cold, cramped jail cell. For someone who had never really experienced discomfort beyond a flight delay or a bad review, that must have felt unbearable. The psychological shift from living in a $48 million mansion to a tiny 6-by-9-foot jail cell is almost unimaginable. How does someone who has enjoyed such luxury even begin to process that? Instead of sleeping on silk sheets, he'd now be on a thin prison-issued mattress. For Diddy, this was likely the moment everything hit home. He's always been in control, over his career, his image, and even the people around him. But now he found himself in a situation where his money and influence couldn't save him. That's a tough blow to anyone's ego, but for someone like Diddy, it felt like a complete nightmare. He was no longer the one calling the shots. Now he was at the mercy of a system that couldn't be bribed or outsmarted. No amount of charm, swagger, or cash could make this problem disappear, and that realization must have been terrifying. Let's not forget that Diddy has faced his share of legal troubles before, but he's always managed to come out on top. It was as if he had a golden touch. Charges would surface, scandals would break, but he often slipped away relatively unscathed. Take the infamous nightclub shooting in 1999, for instance, when Diddy and his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez were arrested after a shooting that left 3 people injured. Somehow, Diddy walked away acquitted while his protege took the fall. Time and again, he's found a way to navigate through the justice system's cracks. But this time feels different. This isn't just about a nightclub fight or a minor scandal. These are serious charges that could land him in prison for life. It's clear that for the first time, Diddy realizes he might not be able to talk his way out of this situation. The thought of possibly spending years, maybe even decades, behind bars must have weighed heavily on him and contributed to his collapse in court. For someone accustomed to living like a king, the idea of being locked up in one of the country's most notorious detention centers is utterly horrifying. As news of Diddy's breakdown began to circulate, reactions from the music industry ranged from shock to deep concern. Celebrities who once viewed him as an untouchable mogul were taken aback by the news. The hip-hop community has always seen Diddy as larger than life, a man who has navigated scandals, legal battles, and the industry's ups and downs, always managing to land on his feet. But this time, many were left wondering if he could bounce back. On social media, reactions varied widely. Some offered their support, while others expressed skepticism, questioning whether this was the beginning of the end for Diddy. It's one thing to have your reputation tarnished by scandal, but for someone like Diddy, who has built his empire on being powerful, invincible, and in control, this collapse was more than just a physical setback. It was a stark symbol of his world crumbling around him. No amount of money or fame could fix this. Concerns about Diddy's life in jail are mounting. High-profile inmates like him experience a unique kind of psychological strain when they enter the prison system. While he's enjoyed a life of luxury, he's also been under constant public scrutiny, with every move followed, praised, or criticized. Throughout his career, he's had an entourage, devoted fans, and his wealth to soften the impact of any criticism. Now, in jail, all of that is gone. The isolation can be especially hard for someone like Diddy, as it's not just about being physically alone. It's about losing everything that defined him in the outside world. Sitting in a cold cell with only his thoughts must feel like the walls are closing in on him. That's why authorities are taking no chances, keeping a close watch on him around the clock to ensure he doesn't harm himself. Things aren't looking good for Diddy at the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, which is notorious for being one of the worst jails in the country. Its brutal reputation is well-earned, with conditions that are nothing short of horrific. Hygiene is almost non-existent, and inmates often go for days without a proper way to clean themselves. The cells are freezing in winter and sweltering in summer, and there have even been reports of power outages that leave the facility in complete darkness, without heat or hot water, sometimes for days. Just imagine being stuck in a frigid cell, shivering under a thin blanket, surrounded by nothing but cold concrete and steel. It's a true nightmare. The overcrowding only compounds the misery. MDC is infamous for cramming inmates into tight spaces well beyond its capacity. There's no privacy, no room to breathe, and you can't let your guard down for a moment. For someone like Diddy, who's used to the spaciousness of his mansions, this cramped environment must feel utterly suffocating. To make matters worse, he's currently in solitary confinement in the Special Housing Unit, SHU, a section reserved for inmates deemed high risk, either to themselves or others. This isn't just any part of the jail. It's where they keep the most dangerous individuals. Diddy is currently confined to a cramped 6-by-9-foot cell. Just think about that. A man who once called a $48 million mansion home is now spending 23 hours a day in a space smaller than most people's closets. Inside, he has a steel toilet and sink combo, a small writing desk, and a thin mattress. That's it. His belongings consist of a single blanket, one uniform, and a few limited commissary items to get by. There's no luxury or comfort here, just a cold, hard, and isolating environment. To make matters worse, the toilet in his cell only flushes 3 times a day. This might seem strange, but it's a standard measure in places like the MDC to prevent inmates from flooding their cells. For Diddy, it's just another reminder of how far he's fallen from his life of unimaginable wealth. Being in solitary confinement means he's allowed out of his cell for just 1 hour each day, and even then, it's only to a small, enclosed yard where he can stretch his legs. He has no interaction with other inmates and is completely cut off from the outside world, except for the guards who monitor him. The contrast between Diddy's previous life and his current situation couldn't be more drastic. Just a few months ago, he was flying on private jets, attending glamorous parties, and living in sprawling estates. Now, his entire existence has been reduced to a tiny jail cell with barely enough room to move. He's gone from a life of endless luxury to the harshest reality. And that's a change no amount of money can fix. Right now, Diddy's cell is far from the comforts he's used to. There are no silk sheets or designer furniture here. Instead, he's stuck with metal furnishings and a blanket that likely feels more like sandpaper than anything cozy. To make matters worse, Diddy has another significant concern: his safety. Given his celebrity status and the nature of his charges, he's a prime target in jail. In the prison subculture, taking down a high-profile inmate like Diddy is seen as a badge of honor, something to brag about. His lawyers are already worried about his safety and have even sought to transfer him to a different facility in New Jersey, where they believe he would be safer. The charges hanging over him are nothing short of terrifying, especially for someone of his stature. If he's found guilty, Diddy could face the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars. But what do these charges really mean, and how did things get so serious? Essentially, the charge he's facing is akin to what you'd see with someone running a criminal enterprise, similar to a mafia boss but with his own twist. In Diddy's case, authorities are accusing him of using his businesses, music empire, connections, and immense wealth to cover up or even orchestrate some serious illegal activities. Diddy wasn't just dabbling in crime, he was allegedly running a full-scale operation, using his power to manipulate others. When people hear about these allegations, they often think of organized crime, and that's exactly what prosecutors are suggesting. They claim Diddy's empire wasn't just about music and fashion, it had a much darker side where all sorts of criminal activities occurred. This isn't just about one or two isolated incidents either. The indictment paints a picture of this behavior happening repeatedly over the years. It's not solely about Diddy's actions either. He's accused of using his businesses, his staff, and even his security team to facilitate these disturbing events. These gatherings weren't just about partying, they were about asserting control. According to various accounts, some women who attended these events felt they had no choice. Diddy allegedly pressured them into participating, using fear or threatening to cut off financial support if they didn't comply. The allegations also include witness tampering and intimidation. With as much money and influence as Diddy has, silencing people can seem easier, or so it appears. Back in 2016, Diddy found himself in hot water after a troubling incident involving his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Allegedly, he assaulted her in a hotel and then paid off the hotel staff to delete the security footage. In a panic, he later sent Cassie a desperate text urging her to call him because the police were closing in. This is where things really started to unravel for him. The prosecution used this incident to argue that Diddy wasn't above tampering with evidence or intimidating his victims. Let's be honest. When you have millions of dollars at your disposal, paying people off or threatening them can become a very real option. That's exactly what the authorities are concerned about. The allegations surrounding his enterprise go even deeper. Prosecutors claim Diddy didn't act alone. Rather, his entire business empire, from Bad Boy Records to his other ventures, was part of a criminal organization meant to facilitate these illegal activities. They even alleged that Diddy's employees assisted him by arranging flights, sourcing women, and ensuring everything went off without a hitch, criminally speaking, of course. From security staff to assistants, those in his circle supposedly played a part in keeping these activities under wraps for as long as possible. Historically, when celebrities and powerful figures face charges like this, the legal fallout can be serious. Diddy's situation reflects many of these past scandals. Just like Harvey Weinstein was once seen as untouchable in Hollywood, Diddy held a similar status in the music industry. However, when people began to speak out, it was as if a dam burst and a torrent of accusations followed. Both men attempted to use their wealth and influence to control the narrative, but ultimately, the truth came to light. Diddy could very well be heading down that same path. The involvement of Jennifer Lopez and Young Miami adds an unexpected twist to the whole situation. You wouldn't believe how deep this story goes. Diddy isn't the only one whose life is in jeopardy. Jennifer Lopez, or J-Lo, and Young Miami might also find themselves facing some serious legal drama. This mess with Diddy has expanded beyond just him. pulling in some of the biggest names in the entertainment industry, with J-Lo and Young Miami caught right in the middle. Let's take a step back to the infamous nightclub shooting in 1999. At that time, Diddy was dating J-Lo, and the two were inseparable, making appearances everywhere together. On December 27, 1999, they were at Club New York, celebrating the release of an album by Diddy's protege, Shine. What began as a fun night quickly spiraled into chaos when an argument erupted, leading to 3 people being injured. Diddy and J-Lo ended up fleeing the scene. Back then, it seemed like Diddy might be facing serious consequences for the incident, but as always, he managed to dodge a bullet, pun intended. In 2001, he was acquitted of all charges, including possession and bribery, but Shine wasn't as fortunate. He took the fall for the shooting and ended up serving a 10-year prison sentence. What's fascinating is that rumors have been swirling for years about J-Lo potentially having a bigger role in the shooting than anyone realized. Can you imagine? If that's true, it means she might have been involved in covering up a crime, and with these new allegations coming to light, she could be pulled back into the investigation. Since that night, J-Lo's career has soared. She's become a global superstar known for her music, acting, and style, and many people have likely forgotten her connection to the 1999 shooting. But with this new lawsuit suggesting her involvement, things could take a serious turn. We're talking about possible legal consequences, too. If the case is reopened and the court finds evidence that she obstructed justice, she could face charges herself. It's no longer just about public perception. It's about whether she can legally distance herself from this situation. Then there's Young Miami, who's facing her own set of allegations that could get her into serious trouble. For those who don't know, Young Miami, whose real name is Keisha Brownlee, was Diddy's on-again, off-again girlfriend for a while, and together, they made quite the headlines as a power couple in the hip-hop scene. However, her connection to Diddy might have pulled her into more trouble than she ever anticipated. According to one of the lawsuits against Diddy, Young Miami is accused of being involved in some questionable activities. The most shocking claim is that she allegedly helped Diddy transport a dangerous synthetic substance on a private jet. Here's what supposedly happened. Back in April 2023, Diddy wanted the item for an event at the Water Music Festival in Virginia. When his usual supplier forgot to deliver it, Diddy's team allegedly reached out to Young Miami and asked her to fly the item from Miami to Virginia, and according to the lawsuit, she went through with it. If this allegation turns out to be true, it's far from a minor issue. It's a serious crime. Transporting illegal items across state lines could put Young Miami in a lot of hot water, especially since the lawsuit claims she was involved in trafficking. So, what's her take on all of this? She's been quite vocal in her support of Diddy, stating that her experiences with him have been completely different and that she can't comment on the accusations others have made against him. "I met Diddy when the world was celebrating him and giving him his flowers," she said. "I just feel like everybody is trying to crucify me for it." But here's the catch. By publicly standing by Diddy and defending him, Young Miami may have inadvertently put herself in the spotlight. If authorities start digging into her connection to Diddy's alleged criminal activities, she could find herself facing charges as well. This brings us to the possible legal repercussions for both J-Lo and Young Miami. If the allegations in these lawsuits turn out to be true, both women could face charges as accessories or accomplices to Diddy's crimes. For J-Lo, the 1999 shooting is like a haunting memory that refuses to fade. With the public already speculating about her potential involvement, it wouldn't take much for prosecutors to reopen the case and pull her back into the courtroom. For Young Miami, the situation is even more complicated. If she's found guilty of transporting illegal items for Diddy, she could be looking at some serious prison time. And let's not forget that Young Miami is still building her career in the music industry. What's wild about all of this is just how far-reaching Diddy's legal troubles have become. It's not just about him anymore. The people around him are getting caught up in the chaos, too. Both J-Lo and Young Miami probably thought their ties to Diddy were simply part of their personal lives, but now those connections are turning into a genuine threat to their futures. This situation serves as a stark reminder of how quickly things can spiral out of control when you're involved with someone facing such serious accusations. While we don't know exactly how this will unfold for J-Lo and Young Miami, one thing is clear. They won't be able to escape the spotlight for long. The public is already forming opinions, and if the legal system gets involved, it could get messy. Both women have built remarkable careers, but this might be the toughest challenge they've ever faced. If they end up facing charges and being convicted, their reputations and futures could be in serious jeopardy. In Hollywood, where image is everything, that's a risk neither of them can afford to take. Now let me share what went down last Thursday, as it was quite a significant day in the Southern District of New York. A lot happened in front of the new judge, Ron Subramaniam, and we finally got a tentative trial date, May 5th, 2025. It's still a bit far off, but several pre-trial conferences are scheduled to take place before then. You have to wonder if Combs is trying to hedge his bets. It seems like he's aware that if he's going to be behind bars for a while, he might as well push for the trial to happen sooner rather than later. In the world of criminal cases, the stakes change depending on whether a defendant is free or locked up. Those who are out often prefer to take their time. After all, they want to ensure a thorough investigation and not rush to any conclusions. But if you're sitting in jail, the clock is ticking, and you're eager to get out as quickly as possible. Given the sheer volume of evidence in this case and the amount of discovery that needs to be tackled by the defense, I suspect that May 2025 might be a bit too optimistic. So, what exactly unfolded in court? Combs and his attorneys appeared, stating they were aiming for that May date. But what happens if the Second Circuit Court of Appeals grants him bail before then? Could he then say, "You know, that May date doesn't work for me anymore. How about we push it to May 2026 instead?" It's an intriguing question. Would that look too obvious, or could he find a way to justify the request? From my perspective, I've always thought Combs came to New York with a strategy. I believe he's been trying to cooperate in hopes of making bail, perhaps to be placed on home confinement for a year or two. This way, he could drag out the trial as long as possible before facing a conviction. If he gets pre-trial release, could he then push to extend the trial date? While courts do allow for trial continuances, they tend to guard the timeliness of trials closely. It's crucial for him to present a legitimate reason for any delay, something like needing an expert witness or having a witness unavailable on the current date. They'll need to be clever in their arguments, perhaps citing that the discovery process has taken longer than anticipated. But there's another angle to consider. Does this urgency suggest they feel confident in their defense? After all, they're asserting readiness to go to trial. They mentioned they'd need just a week to present their defense, which could include cross-examining state witnesses and perhaps calling a few sex workers to testify that everything was consensual. It's a bold strategy that implies they believe they can secure an acquittal. However, rushing to trial might not necessarily reflect confidence. Sometimes it's a tactical move meant to catch the prosecution off guard. Remember, the burden of proof lies with the government. If they're scrambling to gather witnesses and evidence by May 2025, they might not be prepared to prove their case effectively. Then there's the possibility of additional charges. What if a superseding indictment comes into play? That would certainly push the timeline back, as it would require more discovery and give the prosecution additional time to prepare. One of the big discussions in the courtroom that day revolved around discovery. Both sides need to share any evidence that's relevant to the case to ensure a level playing field. Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson informed the judge that they're currently sifting through a staggering amount of electronic information. During the March raids on Combs' mansions in Miami and Los Angeles, along with a private airport in Florida, 96 electronic devices were seized. Among those, 8 devices from Miami contained over 90 terabytes of data. To put that in perspective, think about your phone. It might hold 2 terabytes of information. 90 terabytes is an extraordinary amount, and it's a significant factor in the delays surrounding discovery. There's a massive amount of evidence tied up in electronic devices, things like cell phones, tablets, and computers. When you start talking about external hard drives and, say, over 90 terabytes of data on just one device, you realize this is no small task. Just processing that data could take weeks for a single device. If you have multiple devices, it adds up quickly. A smaller device alone can yield about 20,000 to 30,000 pages of data when printed out. That really highlights how long it's going to take the prosecution to sift through everything. They have to carefully review all that data before they can hand it over to ensure it's relevant and doesn't contain any sensitive information. Then, the defense has its own job of combing through the material to see if they need anything additional based on what they find. If they're fully committed to reviewing the discovery in this case, it could take months, if not longer. But discovery isn't the only topic of discussion at this hearing. Another contentious issue came up involving a claim from the defense that someone from Homeland Security had leaked a notorious video showing Sean Combs allegedly assaulting his ex-girlfriend, Cassandra Venture, back in 2016. CNN aired that video in May, just 2 months after the raids on Combs' homes. Combs' lawyer argued that this video, along with other alleged leaks, has caused damaging and highly prejudicial pretrial publicity that could taint the jury pool, compromising Mr. Combs' right to a fair trial. Prosecutor Emily Johnson pushed back hard against these claims, telling the judge that they were baseless attempts to exclude a critical piece of evidence from the trial. She asserted that not a single one of those alleged leaks originated from the prosecution team. This back and forth shows just how complicated things are getting in this case, with both sides trying to navigate a landscape filled with legal challenges and media scrutiny. The physical pain, fear, and mental strain of solitary confinement are really taking a toll on Diddy. If things don't improve soon, this jail sentence could turn out to be the toughest wake-up call Diddy has ever experienced. What do you think about this situation?
Our next guest is a legend, is a true hero of mine, and so many others, and it is real honor and pleasure to have him here tonight. From Kingston, Jamaica, please give it up for the original MUTABARUKA.
This poem shall speak of the wretched sea that washed ships to these shores, of mothers crying for their young swallowed up by the sea. This poem shall say nothing new. This poem shall speak of time, time unlimited, time undefined. This poem shall call names, names like Lumumba, Kenyatta, Nkrumah, Hannibal, Akhenaton, Malcolm, Garvey, Haile Selassie. This poem is vexed about apartheid, racism, fascism, the Ku Klux Klan, riots in Brixton, Atlanta, Jim Jones. This poem is revolting against first world, second world, third world, division, man-made decision. This poem is like all the rest. This poem will not be amongst great literary works, will not be recited by poetry enthusiasts. It will not be quoted by politicians nor men of religion. This poem is knives, guns, bombs, blazing for freedom. Yes, this poem is a drum, Ashanti, Mama, Igbo, Yoruba, Nyabingi warriors, Yohuru, Yohuru Namibia, Yohuru Soweto, Yohuru Africa. This poem will not change things. This poem needs to be changed. This poem is a rebirth of a people, a rising, awakening, understanding. This poem is speaking, have spoken. This poem shall continue even when poets have stopped writing. This poem shall survive you, me. It shall linger in history, in your mind, in time, forever. This poem is time, only time will tell. This poem is still not written. This poem has no poet. This poem is just a part of the story. His story, her story, Whole story. The story is still untold. This poem is now ringing, talking, irritating, making you want to stop it. But this poem will not stop. This poem is long, cannot be short. This poem cannot be tamed, cannot be blamed. The story is still not told about this poem. This poem is old, new. This poem was copied from the Bible, your prayer book, Playboy magazines, the New York Times, Reader's Digest, the CIA files, the KGB files. This poem is no secret. This poem shall be called boring, stupid, senseless. This poem is watching you trying to make sense from this poem. This poem is fucking up your brains, making you want to stop listening to this poem. But you shall not stop listening to this poem. You need to know what will be said next in this poem. This poem shall disappoint you because this poem is to be continued in your mind, in your mind, in your mind.
Bing over. So my people, this one was indeed a warm one. So feel free to leave an honest comment down in the comment section, and also on your own opinion. And you don't know say me dey upon the Black Unity program. So feel free to leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you're new. Big up to each and everyone. Up until then, peace out. Adios.